Welcome back to the Night Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me this time is my co-host, Craig Epstein. Craig is rejoining the show to talk some Rutgers Temple recap and some other news items. After kind of sleeping on this win, and I rewatched the hour-long replay of it, I feel really good about this team. I feel better than I thought I would. Obviously we were talking off the pod. I predicted 5-7 for this team. I'm starting to feel a little bit more confident that they might be more like a 6-6 team. But just kind of, what are your first thoughts after kind of after like kind of marinating?
You, Mike, if you
want.
Yeah,
you can if you'd like.
Kind of early in the morning
after marinating on this win for a bit, what's your thoughts on how the game went and how you feel about this team?
The game, I mean, it was good. I would say tale of two halves, but it wasn't even really that, to be honest. It was almost like a tale of like 3 quarters versus 1 quarter, because for the first 3 quarters, Rutgers the defense was well for the entire game, so credit to them. But the offense was kind of, it showed more shades of probably last season, where it just wasn't really putting together like great drives and nothing was really going on. It actually kind of resembled a little bit, I think, of the Nebraska game.
Yeah.
Where it was like 13-0. The defense was taking control, but like the offense wasn't really doing much. And it's like if last year, if the offense just one more, they lost 14-13, so you just get 1 field goal and you win the game. So many times as I'm watching this game, I'm thinking to myself, oh, if Rutgers can just find a way to get 1 more score, like this game is probably over, because Temple's offense probably isn't going to put together, 3, consecutive scoring drives against them. And fourth quarter came, and then right after the score, and then fourth quarter came, and the drive happened with Manungai with 6 straight carries for 57 yards. I mean, he just looked like a man amongst boys out there. They just couldn't take him down. And from that moment on, I mean, Rutgers completely took control of the game, scored 23 unanswered points, and it was over. I mean, they really turned what looked like a game on upset alert. They turned it into a blowout.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I envisioned that game going, where we ran the ball a lot in the second half, but not necessarily the way it ended up happening. So I do agree that it had shades in Nebraska, where you're just kind of like, had a really good start, and then you're just kind of like, why aren't we scoring more? What's going on here? This should be more of a game that we are, cruising to. Obviously, we had that early fumble, which takes points off the board, but we scored. Outside of that fumble play, we scored on every drive that wasn't like, we had that Hail Mary at the end of the half, so it's hard to kind of say that we should have scored on a drive that we got the ball with 1:20 left and we're up 13-0. We scored on every drive other than the one we turned the ball over in the first half. In the second half, we start off punt, and you think, what is this offense? The entire third quarter, nobody scored, snooze fest. It felt a lot like the Sean Gleason offense in terms of just like hyper conservative, not really a whole lot of, played. They didn't really seem to kind of approach each drive differently, or it was just kind of like run up the middle, pass on third down. Then after Temple scored, they reinvigorated. They were just, all right, we're going to have to be aggressive now because this is a game again. And right away they stepped on their throats, and that was kind of it. They just needed something, I guess, to kind of light a fire underneath them. Because after Temple scored, we, just marched down the field and scored a touchdown. And then they throw an interception, and then we score again. And then we have a quick 3-and-out, and we score again. And then they throw another interception. So they responded. I'll give them full credit for that. But I do think if we have these kind of lapses in offensive production and against some of our better opponents, because we also have to contextualize Temple's awful. Northwestern is not. They were a home underdog this weekend to UTEP. Obviously, they put a spanking on UTEP, but I think we have to contextualize. We probably played 2 of our 3 worst opponents in the first 2 weeks of the season, which is kind of how you want your schedule to be set up. But they responded, so I'll give them full credit for that. You can really only play the opponents that are put in front of you. But the lull in the third quarter is probably the most concerning thing that comes out of this game for me. Personally.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like through the first 2 games, like you want answers. You got some answers, but this team is still kind of hard to kind of gauge because, like you said, they've played 2 of the worst teams that they're other than Wagner, but 2 of the worst teams that they're probably going to face all year. And I give them credit; they passed the test. I mean, they've won by a combined score of what was the first game, 24, and this was like They won.
Yeah,
They
they've
won.
outscored opponents 60-14 this season.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, they definitely passed that test, but now things get harder. And next week, I think, is their first good litmus test, where Virginia Tech is, I'd say, maybe good might be too short, but they're decent. I mean, they lost to Purdue,
Yep.
which I don't think Purdue's that great either. But they're not a pushover. They're definitely a team that's going to come out and they're going to give Rutgers a game. And it's really just about whether or not is Rutgers going to come out with the win. If Rutgers comes out with the win, then, like you said, there's reason to be optimistic for this season now with the way things are progressing. I mean, you beat Virginia Tech, you got 4 wins. You're going to beat Wagner. I mean, sorry, you beat Virginia Tech, you get 3 wins. You're going to beat Wagner, that's 4. And then can you find a way to scratch across those 2 more wins? As we see now with what's going on in the Big Ten, everything changes so quickly. So is Michigan State now a win? Is Indiana, could that be a win? I mean, it's just in Maryland at the end of the year. Who knows what that game is going to look like when we get there? So it's just, you don't want to look too far into the future, but it's always fun to.
Yeah, no, I think there is probably at least one more win on the schedule. I definitely want to get to that. I just kind of want to round off the game kind of discussion first. I know I get in my head of myself here too. We talked Kyle Monungai. I thought he was incredible. He might be my favorite player on the team, just from he does all the dirty work so well. Like from pass blocking, we obviously all saw that football tape grinder highlight from last week where he just totally leveled the Northwestern linebacker on a blitz. He runs so hard. He's also just able to make the first defender miss so consistently. He had that one catch against Northwestern where he caught the ball in the flat and it looked like he was dead to rights. He makes the linebacker miss and he runs it upfield for another 20 yards. This game he was doing that, like you said, consistently, just churning the ball. He had 5 carries for 56 yards on that one drive.
It was 6.
He's just a dog. Yeah, he's just the emotional leader of this team, from what it seems like watching. Just a total dog. And it's we have a very, very good running back room.
Mm-hmm.
If Sam Brown comes back healthy and Aaron Young comes back healthy, we have 4 or 5 legit running backs in that backfield. And it'll be interesting to see if we line up in some more unique formations with 2 running backs, maybe one lined up in the slot. I know we lined up Al-Shadi Salam last year in the slot at times. But I do think Kirk will take advantage of all our running back talent in unique ways, because they both had Jashawn Benjamin and Sam Brown both had really nice catches out of the backfield. I thought those were 2 of Gavin's best throws too, because he hit those guys full speed in stride and just let them rip up the sideline. Another one of Gavin's best throws is that deep ball to Jaquay Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
We had been talking about Jaquay Jackson all off season as a guy who we thought would be the wide receiver 1 that just had NFL scouts kind of attending D2 practices and D2 games to just evaluate him. This isn't a legit NFL talent. Week 1, he gets his bell rung in the first quarter and he doesn't really play a whole lot after that. This game was definitely his breakout. He was running wide open all day. Gavin could have hit him 2 or 3 more times. On the other deep ball, he missed him. And that was kind of the story of the day. I thought Gavin didn't have quite as good of a game 2 as he did game 1. He did miss more receivers. He had a little bit more pressure on him in the pocket. And it kind of rattled him. Obviously, we won the game, but there are some things you'd like to see cleaned up from this game from Gavin's point of view. He was 10 for 21 on the day. He's at 54% completion percentage on the year, which is the lowest in the Big Ten for any of their starting quarterbacks. He's made a lot of progress this year, but I still think there's a long way to go for him personally.
Yeah, I mean, Gavin, it's so there's aspects to him that just look, you watch him and it looks night and day compared to last year, where you can see. I mean, I think that, like you said, I think that throw to Sam Brown was his best throw of the day. Just stood there, complete poise, knew he was going to take a hit, but still delivered a perfect pass to Brown that led to the touchdown. When you look at that, you're like, wow. And he's just obviously, I mean, he's got such an arm, man. That even though that Hail Mary throw didn't end up amounting anything, I was like, on the run, that guy just blasted. The guy's got such an arm. And, you can see just the decision making is just looks so much better so far. Like
Yeah.
he just knows when to just let a play die. And so credit to him. He's definitely worked on that. His accuracy seems to have gotten well. There's times where, like I said, like there's a lot of times where it seems like he puts too much touch on the ball, and that's kind of the stuff that kind of makes you rip your hair out. And that's kind of stuff that could end up costing you later on down the line, because you see it sometimes and it ends up costing him possible first downs. So that's kind of the aspect that he still continues to work on. And if he can get that down, then he can be even more of a polished quarterback. But right now, it really just seems like, we said it all off season long, and it's no secret. Rutgers is going to be a run first team. Like that's going to be their bread and butter. Like you said, luckily enough, they're going to end up having 4 guys that they can deploy out there. A lot of toys that Kirk can work with. And it's all about, really getting it to third and short. Just as long as Gavin keeps moving the sticks, it's going to be, it's fine. But like I said, once you get into those third and longs, that's where you're going to run into problems. But so far the offense has been doing okay, considering they scored 60 points in 2 games. But now we'll see what happens when they face Virginia Tech, more of a step up in competition.
Yeah, they're definitely a step up. They did have an unfortunate injury. Fortunate for Rutgers, unfortunate for them. They got one of their best players was a transfer portal guy named Ollie Jennings, who they got from Old Dominion this offseason. He unfortunately broke his ankle in the last game, and he's going to be out for the rest of the year. But Virginia Tech fans do not seem very high on this team. Like, if you there's been some people posting it on the boards. They are basically of the mindset that, this is, they picked the wrong quarterback. First of all, they picked a guy named Grant Wells as their starter. He is on the year 33 for 62, which is a 53% completion percentage for 494 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's taken 3 sacks. Doesn't seem like they're very high on the guy. I don't know a whole lot about him. I'm hoping to discuss that more when we have a Virginia Tech writer on this week. But this guy, Ollie Jennings, last year at Old Dominion, so the last 2 years at Old Dominion, he started off at West Virginia. Last year, he had 54 catches for 959 yards and 9 touchdowns. The year before that, he had 62 catches for 1,066 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's the senior leader on this team. He is done for the year. He had 5 catches for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns in a game and a half for Virginia Tech this year. And like you said, they lost to Purdue, Purdue had an ugly week 1 loss. I don't remember who it was to. I'll look that up now. But Purdue didn't really look really that great either. They lost at home to Fresno State in the first game of the season. I guess we'll kind of this will be, like you said, the litmus test for Rutgers, because they did play 2 pretty awful teams week 1 and 2. This is a mediocre team, Virginia Tech. I'd say that it's a good measuring stick game because Brent Pry's in his second year. He's, like I said, he's taken a lot of transfers, so this will be a good measuring stick game. Like I said, I don't know a whole lot about Virginia Tech at the moment. I will be doing more research on them throughout the week. Have you been able to catch any of their games this year?
No, not really. I kind of followed along with the Purdue game, where it was Purdue went up 17-0, and then they had a 5.5 hour weather delay, and I was like, and then they and then they kind of made a comeback. I was like, yeah, because they can just go back into the locker room with that amount of time. You just formulate a whole new game plan. So it's just like, I don't know, that whole thing seemed kind of weird. So they made a slightly comeback, but they ended up losing in the end. And like I said, I haven't watched much Purdue football this year, but I don't think they're a special team by any means. So that the fact that Virginia Tech lost them tells me that maybe I think that is a winnable game for Rutgers. And looking at the look at the line right now. It's I believe before the Temple game, I want to say Rutgers. I forget if there was a line or not, but right now Rutgers is I think a 4.5 point favorite. And
I believe it opened at 3 or 3.5, depending on what book you were looking at, and has risen a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be surprised if this rose up to around 7. So if you want to get in on this, I know as a New Jersey resident, most of you cannot do that. But if you happen to find yourself in Pennsylvania or New York, bet on this game early in the week because that line will continue to rise. In my opinion.
Here's the real question, though, Mike. Are you going to bet on it? Because these people have to follow the Mike Broadbent system because this man has been killing it recently.
Yeah, I was all over Colorado at, I believe Colorado was a 2.5-point favorite. I thought that line was one of the worst lines I've seen in a long time. So I bet that up.
Because they don't believe in Dion, that's why.
I mean, I just more so did not believe in Nebraska. Like, if you watched them week 1, how did you think that they were going to come in and compete with Colorado? Like, all amped up. This Dion's first game at home. Like, if you had been listening to anything going on this week, people talking about what it was like in Boulder, they said it was like you could not, like, the amount of buzz that this team has was equivalent to the buzz they were getting in the early 90s when they were winning, like, national championships and Big 12 or Big 8 championships at that. I don't remember what it was. Big 12 or Big 8, whatever the conference was named at the time.
No,
they said
insane.
That
what's going on right there, it's insane.
They said that there wasn't any tickets available for this game. They said that, aftermarket pricing was through the roof. There was so much buzz about this game that even if they totally shit the bed, they weren't going to lose to Nebraska at home. And so I bet that game up to -6.5, -9.5, and sure enough, it hit. I also, as you heard and you saw my prediction, I had Rutgers winning pretty easily, easily covering. I bet Rutgers at 9.5 when it opened last week, and I bet it when it was at 7.5. So good weekend for me. Good weekend in the NFL too, but we were told in the live broadcast that they don't really want to hear about NFL stuff. So we'll stick to college stuff. I will be betting on Rutgers to cover the 4.5-point spread. I haven't made the bet yet because I kind of want to see if I can get some more draft.
Tease it, Mike. You can tease it.
Well, FanDuel's been doing some really good promos early in the season, so I want to see if I can get a promo parlay bet before I actually lock in anything. But yeah, I will be making that bet this week.
Beautiful. There you go. So there you go, people. The Mike Broadbent stamp of approval.
Yeah. Kind of around the Big Ten, I kind of opened saying that I think this might be more like a 6-6 team now. After thinking 2 weeks ago when I made my prediction that it would be 5-7. Late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, news broke about a Title IX investigation at Michigan State. Mel Tucker was apparently accused of some pretty gross things. There's a woman who does sexual assault consulting. She's a survivor of sexual assault, and I'm sure you guys have seen her. She goes around to programs and talks to them about how to better protect women who are around your program, and how basically just not to be a total piece of shit. And Mel Tucker's claiming they had a consensual relationship, and she is claiming they do not. And there's some allegations of him doing some things over the phone he shouldn't have been doing as a married man. And I can't imagine him surviving this, especially with how much turmoil Michigan State's been under for sex crime stuff with Larry Nassar and whatnot. So that kind of turmoil, I think, made Michigan State for me like a 50-50 game to a game Rutgers will be favored in. Because if you look at who they've lost, like Peyton Thorne's doing pretty well down in Auburn. He was their starting quarterback last year. Keon Coleman, the wide receiver, has been a total stud. I think he's on Florida State now. Florida State or LSU. I know he played in that opening game, so I'm not sure which team specifically he's on, but I'm pretty sure it's Florida State. They've lost a lot of talent, and losing their coach too, even though some people will say he's not a great coach, it doesn't matter. You're still you're like totally, turning the program over mid-season. That's not,
I'm not gonna lie. That's true. But I'll be honest. There was a part of me who saw Mel Tucker's most likely probably going to get fired, and I was like, I don't know. But Mel Tucker kind of stinks. So I was like, are they going to somehow get better without Mel Tucker? Like now, it's what I forget. The assistant guy is going to be the
secondary coach.
Now D'Antonio somehow found his way back into. So now I'm like, oh well, okay.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen it, Mark D'Antonio has been brought in as some kind of special assistant. They haven't announced his formal role on the with the football program, but he's rejoining in some capacity for the rest of the season.
Could you imagine if he gets the job back?
I mean, I was saying this, like, could he pull a Bill Snyder and just like, I'm getting too old for this shit, and then he ends up staying for another 5 years? I could see it. Like Mark Antonio, he retired pretty young in relative terms. I think he's in
Huggins
his.
would be so jealous.
Oh yeah, yep. So he retired in 2019. So he was 63 when he retired, and he kind of left them in a lurch too. Because if you remember, he retired in like February. This is after signing day. He would. I don't know the full reasoning for him retiring, but
no, I mean I remember in our group chat, Alec brought up a good point that he retired late in the cycle. That caused kind of Michigan State to scramble a bit. They hired Mel Tucker from Colorado. Colorado ends up I forget the guy's name, who they basically go 1-11. They're a disaster, and that's what leads to them hiring Deion. So I guess Mark Antonio basically shaped the landscape of college football.
Yeah, he did in a lot of ways.
And he might be doing it again.
The Big Ten in general hasn't been very impressive to start the calendar year. You saw Wisconsin lose at Washington State this past weekend. It's the second year in a row they've lost to Washington State. Wisconsin has struggled a bit in this new offense, and you would expect that because they brought in so many transfers. You're going from a power running game to an air raid offense. It kind of comes with the territory that there's going to be some growing pains. I thought Michigan's looked really good. JJ McCarthy is just, elevating his game. He's got, on the season, he's completing 87% of his passes and he's thrown 55 attempts.
No, yeah, the Big Ten, I mean, it's top heavy, where you look at the Michigans, the Ohio States, the Penn States, the teams that are always there. They're awesome. They're going to be in the running for the college football playoff. But then you look at kind of the middle pack to the lower teams, and it's kind of gives me Big Ten basketball vibes, where it's like they have awesome defenses, but their offenses are kind of, nothing to write home about. So if you score like basically 24 plus points, you're probably going to win.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think Ohio State's kind of look like they've stepped down a level as a program. Like, I didn't think they looked good against Indiana. I didn't think they looked good against Youngstown State for the first half. Because, I mean, if you look at early in that game, they didn't really look like themselves. They had a couple big plays, but it was 14-7 after the first quarter. And if you look at the scoreboard, it was 28-7 at halftime, but they didn't score. They scored one touchdown the rest of the game. Like, I think Kyle McCord is still kind of getting his feet underneath him. The point is, when they transitioned from Urban to Ryan Day, it was a seamless transition because you had Justin Fields there. Justin Fields, they transitioned to CJ Stroud. Seamless transition. I don't see that same seamless transition from Stroud to McCord. I don't think he's nearly the level that CJ Stroud was. And it's kind of shown early in the season. I think the class of the Big Ten, honestly, is Michigan and Penn State. I think Penn State's been a team that's really impressed me, as much as that pains me to admit. And Michigan, I think everybody who is watching Michigan this year should have expected this, because they brought back a pretty huge amount of their team from last year. They have a lot of senior leadership, a lot of guys who could have been high draft picks in the NFL draft decided to stick around. So I think those two teams are the class of the Big Ten. And I'll tell you, Rutgers has played Michigan close essentially since Greg showed up. If you think of the COVID year, we go triple overtime. 2021, that was the game at the Big House where we were in it to the end. A couple missed field goals by Rutgers late kind of did us in. We lost 20-13. Last year we're winning at halftime until the floodgates opened. I'm not saying Rutgers is going to beat Michigan. I'm not saying it's going to even be close, but they played close, and Rutgers is clearly much improved. Michigan's arguably one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country. But I wouldn't count Rutgers out completely there. If the spread is really out of whack, like if Rutgers is a 20-plus point underdog, I will be betting on Rutgers in that
game. Yeah, I mean, I got to see how they play Virginia Tech first. If they can, if they do to Virginia Tech what they've done really the last the first 2 games, then I'll be like, okay,
Mhm.
they're probably, like I said, I don't think, even if they beat Virginia Tech, even if they blow Virginia Tech out, I don't think they're going to beat Michigan. But
Yep.
if they take care of business against Virginia Tech, then I can look at that game and be like, well, maybe it's worth keeping an eye on, just because you never know. It could be, and maybe a competitive game, and maybe College Game Day will come down to. Oh no, the game's at Michigan, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
the
it's at
game's at
Michigan.
Michigan.
Yeah.
Hate to
Well,
see it.
at this point, like College Game Day, it's an awesome experience. I would love for it to be at Rutgers, but I think there's so many other outlets that do a similar thing now that
Mhm.
it's you get just as much buzz if uh, Big Noon Saturday is at your campus or Barstool's.
Mhm.
I don't know if they've done it yet, but their campus tour thing that they were at last year for Rutgers, Nebraska, I think it was.
Mhm.
I think that could be just as big. Um,
Mike, I got an idea.
what's that?
TKR Game Day.
We've kind of talked about having some kind of live get together for a tailgate, but I think everyone's just got their tailgate situation, so it'd be tough to actually get people. I think it makes more sense just kind of like roam around and schmooze. Um, but I'm now realizing we haven't really talked at all about how the defense played against Temple, so I want to kind of circle back around to that
Mhm.
because another total standout performance by the defense. Even though the sack numbers weren't there, I don't think you could have realistically expected a ton of sacks from uh, our point of view, just because how quick EJ Warner gets the ball out. And I know Craig has repeated that a bunch this week and last week at this point. He's got like one of the fastest throw times in college football. And so he was getting the ball out really quickly. It just wasn't really resulting in positive plays. I thought he got lucky on a lot of his completions where he would not lucky. He obviously knows what he's doing, but it was just like he would hold the ball as long as he possibly could, then like waft it out to the sideline, and he'd have that guy Dante Wright wide open or one of their tight ends. He just completed a lot of passes that were like, you got to be fucking kidding me. But yeah, Rutgers forced 3 turnovers on the day,
And 2 of them were
two
right
turnovers.
after the scoring drive. They would think it was like I forget. I think it was like turnover, punt, turnover, turnover, then like turnover on downs, and that was pretty much it. Something like that. Defense completely woke up after that, and yeah, they've been. I mean, it's almost like it's almost become a point where it's like you expect it. I mean, the defense we said all off seasons would been awesome, and so far through the first 2 games, it's been awesome. And I actually think right now, I mean, we've talked so much about guys like Aaron Lewis, who we think both of us think, and I'm sure Richie and everybody thinks that guy could play at the next level. He's been, I mean, he's just constantly in the backfield. He might not get the sack, but he's constantly, getting the quarterback to get off his platform. Wesley Bailey, he got kind of banged up in that first game, but he's been really good too. And I actually think so far through the first 2 games, the MVP of their defense has been Flip Dixon. The guy has been just everywhere, whether it's rushing the passer, defending it. I mean, let me know what you think. But he's kind of, even though he's not as bulky as this guy, but he's kind of giving me a little bit of Kasim Green vibes.
Yeah, I think. Who do you say reminds you of Kasim Green? Sorry,
Flip Dixon.
Yeah, so Flip Dixon, he's been arguably it's hard to say he's been the best player on the defense because I think there's been like 3 or 4 guys who have really stood out for me, but he has been the best addition to the team in my opinion so far through 2 games. He's clearly just, he was coached by Joe Harris-Simiak. Joe Harris-Simiak was the safeties coach at Minnesota. I gotta sneeze a little.
Okay.
Sorry. He was the safeties coach at Minnesota, and once Flip Dixon entered the portal, it seemed like kind of, he was inevitably coming here. He's just been fantastic. The whole third quarter was basically like, Flip quarter.
Mm-hmm.
He just made play after play. There was a play that I believe they tried to call pass interference on, but they picked up the flag. He just played all over the field, and I feel like you could have said that about a lot of guys on Sunday or Saturday, that they were just all over the field. Tyreen Powell was just a guy who, he's just like when they design up like what they want the modern NFL linebacker to look like and move like, it's Tyreen Powell. Like he's just 6'4", like 230 pounds, has great lateral movement skills. He's got great straight line speed. He's pretty good in coverage. He's shown the ability to blitz. Motoré has been fantastic since he came back. I
Mm.
was a little concerned that coming off his knee injury, he wouldn't have that same explosiveness, but it's still very much there. Deion Jennings is a guy that we haven't given a ton of credit on the program over the years, but he had, 3 pass deflections on Saturday. The one was just an incredible play, knocking the ball away from a tight end. And they do such a great job of teaching to kind of punch through the hands when they're at the catch point, because you don't necessarily always see guys doing it. Every DB is taught that, but it's different for somebody to be taught that and then to actually do it. And our guys all do it. And so it's really, just awesome to see when they have a guy who's got the ball, two hands on the ball, should have an easy catch, and they just punch right through, and it becomes an incompletion. Aaron Lewis, even though he hasn't gotten the sack numbers, I thought he's been very disruptive all season. I could just go on and on, because Wes Bailey also, I think, has done really good. He was banged up from the Temple game, and he didn't play his full share of snaps on Saturday. But I expect him to just be a total game wrecker. I do expect there's going to be a game this year that our defense wins for us.
Mm.
I don't know what game that's going to be.
You could argue they won it for him against Temple. I mean, if
yeah, what I mean is, like, they are like the one score difference. Like, Rutgers has just been way better than both teams they played so far, and you could say the defense did win them both games because the defense has been incredible. But I just mean, like, there's going to be times where we face offenses roughly as good as our defense, and we're going to have to win that kind of juggernaut battle. But it hasn't happened yet.
Right, and Max Melton's been awesome too. I mean, he's kind of getting back to where we thought, where he was kind of last year. We were thinking he's going to be a top draft prospect, and kind of had a down year, so he didn't end up going. But this year, he looks like he's kind of back to that, and now he's kind of, like I said, going back to that, becoming a top draft prospect again.
Yeah, I did think Max had a bit of a down game, honestly, on Saturday. He had a couple penalties against him.
The referees didn't help.
Yeah, there were some times where the secondary in general didn't seem like they were passing off guys. I hope that'll get corrected, I know, but there were a few miscues in the secondary. That was one of the only kind of negatives I had on the defense. They were awesome. Let's just give them their credit. They were very, very good. And if you just look at the PFF grades, in terms of PFF grades, anything above 70 is a good game. We had Aaron Lewis get an 82.5 grade, Wesley Bailey get a 72.7 grade, Isaiah Aiton get a 74.2, Tyreen Powell got an 84.6, Deion Jennings had the highest score of anybody on the team at 86.0, Flip Dixon had a 77.8, Des Igbenuson had a 71.7. Like, when half your defense is putting up grades like that, and I know a lot of you listening out there aren't really huge PFF fans, but when you get that many high-level grades, your unit as a whole is working pretty well. So can't really say much negative about the defense. They've honestly only allowed 7 points, because I don't count the Northwestern touchdown against the defense. You give, after you just like had them out in the field for a sustained drive, you force a punt, and then the other team gets the ball at like the 20 with a minute left or 2 minutes left, whatever it is, you're going to score. So,
and they still almost stopped.
him, yeah. So I think the Our Football Twitter account posted 7 points allowed for the defense, so I think they're counting that as well as not a score. So shout out to the defense. Keep doing your thing. Another thing we haven't talked about, let's talk about Jay Patel. What a revelation he has been. Even though we haven't necessarily needed the points, the fact that Greg feels confident enough sending his kicker out in the first quarter of a 7-point game to attempt a 51-yard field goal, and then there's a bad snap on that field goal, and he still just hits it with ease. I know it kind of looked like a knuckleball, at least on the live broadcast, but to hit a 51-yard field goal under those kind of conditions, and not the rain, but just like a bad snap, it's very impressive. And he's just been very impressive in general. He also hit I think a 43-yarder and a chip shot field goal in the game. Obviously he missed the one against Northwestern, but to have a kicker that you feel comfortable enough to send out to try a 50-plus yarder is it's a thing we haven't had in a while. I'll just
Yeah,
put
it's
it that way.
interesting because I feel like in the offseason we were talking about how he was a good kicker, but once the farther, once you start getting into that kind of range, that's more of like a Jude range, because we kind of joked last year, like Jude would hit like a 50-yarder, but then he'd miss like a 20 or like a 30-yarder. It was just such a
Yeah.
weird
Yep.
thing. So you see 51 yards and he goes out and you're like, oh man, is he? You don't know. And he, like you said, he just nailed it. So that's definitely gonna help his reputation. When Rutgers is in kind of that range, that he can go out there and make those field goals. And if he can continue to do that, that's just gonna add another layer to this offense. So Middlesex County kid, love to see it.
Oh yeah. Also want to shout out Jude. He's been so good on kickoffs. We haven't had a single kickoff return this year. Every single one has been a touchback. And that's huge because the kickoff returns are probably the most dangerous play in football. So if you can, I know Greg likes to play a lot of his starters or a lot of the guys who play a lot on defense on the kickoff recover or kickoff units. So to not have them in situations where they can get hurt is huge. I thought Flynn Appleby has been better than expected. He's had 8 punts on the season. 5 of them have been down inside the 20. He hasn't had any touchbacks
he hasn't
yet.
exactly had to do much so far this season.
He has not. But if you can't, basically, if you're not talking about the punter, he's probably doing something right,
exactly.
for the most part. Like, there's not many times where you have an Adam Korsak who can, boot it on occasion 70-plus yards. And that's not on, through the air. That's through bouncing. How many times did he pin it down at the 1 in his career? I'd imagine it's over 10. So he was just a total unicorn. But Flynn Appleby is a useful punter in the sense that I was just expecting a big drop-off, and there hasn't been nearly as big of a drop-off in the punting department.
I don't want to jinx it, but I think that now they've gone a couple years now without having a touchback on a punt, because between Korsak and now Appleby hasn't.
No, Korsak had one last year. It was like 155 straight or something like that, but he did have one at least.
Hate to see it.
It was a long time between, for sure. And it sounds like he's having a pretty good start to his CFL career as well. I saw a few graphics of some of his exploits in his first season. I think he's playing for the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
I was going to say that. I was going to joke. I was like, playing for the Roughriders.
Yeah, I think he actually is.
Good for him. Happy to see that. I wish he'd get a shot in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he did have a couple minicamp invites. He got an invite to the Chiefs. He got an invite to the Steelers. And, I think he might just have to kind of keep his head, keep just doing what he's doing, keeping his head down. And there's been plenty of guys who made transitions from the CFL to the NFL, or the XFL to the NFL, or the USFL to the NFL. You just got to keep it up. He's having a pretty good start over there, and he had an awesome career in college. So we'll see. Do you have anything else, Craig? We kind of went through almost. I think we covered everything we wanted to hit today. Is there anything you wanted to touch on before we sign off here?
No, I think that just about covers everything. Like you said, I think that there's reason for optimism. If Rutgers can beat Virginia Tech, then the way everything's playing out, I do think 6 wins could be on the table. And if you can get that, obviously the Wagner, you can get the Wagner, you should win that. And if you can get that Michigan State win, then possibly you're looking at maybe wrapping up all eligibility against Indiana. And if you can do that, that would be a huge boost for this program. But like I said, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. Focus on Virginia Tech this week, because it's definitely a big game.
Yeah, the biggest element, if they do wrap up, let's say hypothetically they get to 6-2 by the time the end of the Indiana game rolls around. The following weekend, or not the following weekend, we have a bye, and then we got Ohio State at home on November 4th.
College game day coming. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not saying college game day, but that atmosphere will be electric. If we're 6-2, playing Ohio State, who, like I said, has looked like they're a step down this year from where they have been the last 5 to 10 years. Their offensive line has kind of struggled early in the season. I do think that Rutgers would have a shot in that game because that would not be a noon kickoff. That if it is noon kickoff, it would be because it's a big noon game. So that's going to be a game that has the lights on at some point. If it's November start at 3:30, it's going to get to the point where you need the lights on by 6-ish, or it's going to be a night game, which would be huge. So that's a game I have circled on the calendar as more winnable than I would have thought at the beginning of the season. Still don't think they'll win, mind you, but I do think that will be a game we have a chance in, whereas previously I didn't think we had any chance.
It's fun to be optimistic.
It is fun to be optimistic, and sometimes we get accused of not being optimistic enough. I just think when you watch practice and you see what's going on and you talk to other people and you hear what's going on, I think it was a situation where it was tough to be overly optimistic heading into the season. Now that we've seen some evidence and we've seen our opponents not live up to expectations too, I think there's the scientific method of being more optimistic for the season is proving out. I do think there's reason to be more excited than we would have collectively thought for this team 2 weeks ago, as we are today. So.
Yep.
But for me, Craig, thanks to everybody who listened. Thanks to all of you who have rated and reviewed us in the past. We haven't been pushing it, but if you haven't yet and you've listened to the show, I don't know what you're waiting for. It really helps us find a new audience, and we've grown a huge amount in the last we've almost done it for 2 years, actually. So the September 22nd, 2021 was our first episode.
That would have been crazy.
And now, that would have been crazy. So we're closing in on our 2-year anniversary. So thanks to everybody who has listened in the past, who's rated and reviewed us, who's subscribed on YouTube, who's got us subscribed to in their favorite podcasting app. I will stop this rant now, but thanks to everybody. This has been another edition of the Night Report podcast. Signing off.